There's a person called at fake Prof Wilson Fake, and he says, what fascist past, as you seem to have omitted it as well. It's a reference to the comments made by Starmer against Farage and the interesting articles that appeared this morning in the newspapers. So thank you, fake Prof Wilson Fake, or John Smith, or whatever you are this evening. Quite right, I did not go into nearly enough detail, so thank you very much for encouraging me to do so. Tonight it is Dulwich College, the Hogwarts of home counties racism in full. And I know people who went to Dulwich College, and as far as I know, none of those were infected by this racist experience. So I don't quite know why Farage has come out as somebody who is so marked by his experience at a little school in London. So, recapping the headlines, The Guardian has now published a long investigation speaking to more than a dozen of Nigel Farage's contemporaries at Dulwich College, who alleged that teenage Farage was not just a cheeky contrarian, but a boy who strutted around giving Nazi salutes, chanting Sieg Heil, telling classmates Hitler was right, and hissing gas them to Jewish pupils to imitate the gas chambers. And the others recall him teaching or leading the infamous Gas 'em All song on cadet force coaches, a grotesque parody of Bless 'em All, and talking, it's itself a parody, and talking happily about repatriation and our black and brown friends in a tone that made it perfectly clear they were not actually friends at all. One former pupil remembers Farage at 17 ceremoniously burning a school roll that had, horrors of horrors, more Patels than Smiths, treating the ethnic mix of the intake as something to be dramatised and lamented. Others speak of him picking out small Asian boys in the playground for random detention simply because of their skin colour, and he was a prefect. It is not one stray remark. The picture offered by these witnesses is of a school persona built around race, hierarchy, and the humiliation of others. Now, of course, Farage denies all this emphatically. Formally, in legal letters, Reform says the allegations are entirely without foundation and that there is no contemporaneous record or corroborating evidence from nearly 50 years ago. His line today is mischievous, perhaps? Racist or anti-Semitic? No. And he hints at possible legal action, though his spokesman is careful to keep it in that hazy territory of potentially yes. That is lawyer speak for, we would quite like the chilling effect without the bother of actual court. And this is where the story collides with politics in 2025. At PMQs this afternoon, Keir Starmer, answering a question from Lee Anderson with Farage sat beside him, said in effect, your leader has not had time to condemn his MPs calling children in care evil. Perhaps he might find time now to explain these stories in today's papers about racism. Downing Street then briefed that the allegations are disturbing and that Farage must urgently explain himself. So this is no longer niche Dulwich gossip, which actually has been doing the rounds for some time. It is at the centre of the argument about who gets to govern the country. 3 points then about evidence, timing and character. First, we are not in a criminal trial. There is no video of 17-year-old Nigel doing the Hitler salute in the Dulwich bus, in the Dulwich smokers bus. What we do have is a 1981 letter from an English teacher, Chloe Deacon, protesting against Farage being made a prefect, citing his publicly professed racist and neo-fascist views, and a report that he marched through a Sussex village shouting Hitler Youth songs. We have multiple independent accounts from former pupils given on the record with names and jobs, BAFTA-winning directors, doctors, editors, academics, whose stories are remarkably consistent about the tone and content of Farage's behaviour. And awkwardly for him, Farage's own admission on Channel 4 that he had said some ridiculous things, not necessarily racist things, it depends how you define it. That is a very different register from his current blanket denial that he had said anything racist or anti-Semitic as a boy. You cannot have it both ways. The naughty lad who pushed boundaries in 2013 and the immaculate innocent of 2025. They cannot be the same person. The second problem is the timing. The Telegraph, with Brendan O'Neill in full pearl-clutching mode, is outraged that we are all talking about alleged schoolboy behaviour of the late 1970s, playground gossip. God help us if we're judged by the follies of our youth, and so on. And of course you remember David Cameron's admonition that we are entitled to a past. Now, that line would have more force if we were dealing with one offhand remark. The person had grown up into a saintly model of racial sensitivity, and there had been clear contrition somewhere in the intervening 40 years. But that is not what we have. We have a politician whose adult career has been built around immigration identity and a very narrow view of Britishness, whose party proposes scrapping indefinite leave to remain and making people who have lived here for decades reapply to stay, and whose MPs talk about adverts being full of black people and children in care being evil without meaningful sanction from the leader. We have the story of Coburn, who made racist jokes about a man who then became the First Minister in Scotland. And Farage didn't discipline this man. Farage simply said, well, it's just a joke. Can't he take a joke? In that context, school stories do not float in isolation. They look uncomfortably like chapter 1 of a consistent worldview. And this is where the Nolan principles and the question of leadership come in. Several ex-pupils say openly they are not trying to prove that Farage is secretly a card-carrying Nazi now. They are saying what bothers us is the lack of honesty, the lack of contrition, and the total refusal to acknowledge that any of this might have happened. In other words, if you cannot tell the truth about yourself as a teenager, why should we trust you with power as an adult? So let's also deal with the boys will be boys defence. Teenagers say appalling things. Yes, many of us would cringe if every sixth form joke was exhumed in our 60s. The question is not, did 15-year-olds in 1977 sing racist songs on a coach? Clearly some of them did, and some of them are now deeply ashamed of it. One former Dulwich pupil says he's been haunted by the memory of singing Gas 'Em All 40 years ago. The question is, when confronted with this history, do you say, yes, I was an idiot, I'm sorry, I'm ashamed, I would never speak like that now, and I absolutely reject those attitudes today? Or do you say, nothing happened, there is no evidence, this is all a cynical smear, move along? The first answer is human, the second answer is political, carefully lawyered, aggressively defensive, and to my ear, rather questionable. It creaks, it doesn't sound like a man at ease with his own past. There is also lurking underneath a very practical question. Where did all this Nazi material come in from pre-internet Dulwich? There's no YouTube channel called Hitler Youth Bangers Top 10 Tracks. If these boys were marching through Sussex villages allegedly shouting Hitler Youth songs, someone had learned these songs somewhere. Was it a cadet force culture, a particular teacher winking at the jokes, a small circle of boys trying to be outrageous? We simply do not know. And of course this could be used as evidence that the story is fake. But that is precisely why these testimonies matter. They pull back the curtain on a certain strand of elite culture in the late 70s, cadet uniforms, pseudo-military swagger, gas chamber jokes, the casual burning of a roll because there are too many Patels. It is not an accident that Farage has always sounded like he is auditioning for a lost Enoch Powell speech. If you wanted to know where he learned his repertoire, you might check the Dulwich College archives before the local library cupboard behind the old Dutch masters. Politically, this goes to the heart of the Farage project. Reform tells us it is simply speaking for ordinary people who are worried about immigration, crime and national identity, yet time and time again we find a pattern. Candidates and MPs who say explicitly racist things, a leader who hesitates, delays or refuses to condemn them, a constant insistence that the real problem is not racism but the people pointing it out. When Starmer calls the policy of ending indefinite leave to remain racist and immoral, He is not randomly hurling insults. He is describing a concrete proposal to strip settled status from people who've built their lives here and to create exactly the atmosphere of insecurity that teenage Farage allegedly enjoyed inflicting on 9-year-olds at the school gate. That's the way back. You do not need to call every Reform voter racist. You do not need to ask whether this leader with his history, this rhetoric and this refusal to apologise can plausibly be defined to be defending British values of decency and fairness. Well, maybe you do need to ask the second question. That is the one you have to ask. The first question, absolutely, most Reform voters are not racist. But the second one, was the leader at one time racist? Does he tolerate racists in others? Does he see a wayward past and want to dismiss it as just a joke? This is fundamentally the problem. Of course, there will be those people who will say, well, this charge that Farage wants to send people back, surely the present Home Office, the Labour Home Office, is now planning to do exactly that, at least in a limited way. It's the same charge. Yeah, it probably is in many ways. But the point is, you don't exonerate somebody by saying somebody else is just as bad. So where does this leave us? I would suggest 3 closing thoughts that might be of use. 1, we should not criminalise adolescence, but we should scrutinise. We shouldn't criminalise anybody's past. But if somebody wants to be Prime Minister, their past surely is relevant, particularly when it echoes their present. I agree with David Cameron. People are entitled to a past. But when this past impinges on their present, then maybe we should lift the curtain. The real test is not what you said at 17 as well, but what you say at 61. A simple, unambiguous apology would have drained much of the poison from this story. Instead, we get legal threats and blanket denial and, well, it's just a joke, when it's somebody else. Well, it's just a joke. Can't you take a joke? This is ultimately about trust, not gossip. Voters are being asked to hand enormous power to a man whose political career has been built on dividing us from them, and they are entitled, therefore, to ask, is this just a naughty schoolboy provocation, or is it a very consistent ideology wearing a slightly better suit? Fake Prof. Wilson Fake, this person who's been leaving these comments, was right to complain that we've not gone into enough detail, that neither I've gone into enough detail, nor I think, frankly, have the newspapers. There's nothing here, put very bluntly, that I haven't heard before. Nothing. The detail is now in front of us, however, and what we do with it and what Farage chooses to do with his own past will tell us a great deal about what kind of country we are about to become.